Welcome back for another Stencil of the Month video tutorial. This month is March's and it's the spring umbrella. So it's this little upside down umbrella with the flowers growing out of it. This is a super fun design. I'm really excited to frost it. So let's get started. We're going to start with our base stencil and we're just going to line that up with our clear sheet of plastic here. And I always tape down that plastic to help keep it from shifting while I'm frosting. And you can frost as many of these as a time as you want. I'm just going to be doing the one for the tutorial video right now. Once you have that base stencil set down, come in with one of your guides. If you don't have these guides, you can see how thin they are. These are like super, super thin. This is how thick you want each layer to be when you frost it. So if you don't have these guides, make sure that you are frosting very thin layers. We are going to frost this the base stencil 3 different times. And this is going to help create a really sturdy base so that you don't have any breakage when you go to attach it to your cookie. I already have my icing to the right consistency. You want to make sure, well, actually, now I've been talking, it may have dried out a little bit, but you want to make sure, yeah, it's a little bit dry. You can see that these peaks are very stiff. So I'm going to add just 2 drops, and I just have this little thing of water with a little dropper tool. Add 2 drops of water. I only add a little bit at a time so I don't overdo it too much, make it too runny. All right, this icing dries out fairly quickly, so you want to have an icing where you pull up and that tip starts to curl over. It's not super stiff, but you still have a stiff peak. It just curls a little bit at the tip. That's what you're looking for with your icing consistency. All right, there's a lot of texture where these flowers come up on the top. So I'm going to just do kind of a rainbow swipe to attach all of those, get those all tacked down first. Now those are tacked down, I'm going to come down and do the bottom of the umbrella, and then we can fill in that center. You always want to tack down your edges first. This is the secret to achieving those really crisp, clean lines. Along with your icing consistency, those two are the main factors to get these nice, clean designs. All right, if you don't have this guide, at this point you're just going to try and keep your scraper as level with the table as possible. And again, you want these layers to be thin. You don't want to be scraping all the way down to that clear plastic, but you want it to be pretty close, very thin. Oh, I just noticed that I missed a spot on this edge here. Just make sure you have a scraper that spans across both sides of this frame. And that's going to act as your guide for how thick to do these. And you're just going to gently apply an even pressure and just scrape right across. Take off that frame, anchor in one corner and peel from the opposite. And you can see how crisp and clean these are, and these frames help make it so it's perfectly flat as well. It just makes it so much easier to frost the rest of our design when our base is actually fully flat. Right, I'm going to let this dry. I'm going to turn on my desktop fan, let it dry about 5 minutes. If you don't have the base layer guide, it could take 10 to 15 minutes just because the thickness may not be exactly this thick. It might be a little bit thicker in some areas, so it needs a little bit more time. Right, you want to make sure that these are fully dry before moving on to your next layer. That way your icing doesn't kind of peel up or stick to your stencil. I added 1 frame down to lift the stencil up to the same height as this transfer, and then I'm going to sandwich the stencil between another frame. So the second frame acts as your new guide for how thick to frost your layer. Just want to make sure it's nice and smooth and flat. If you have any imperfections, these first 2 layers don't matter as much because we're just frosting over them. But on our next layer, that's going to be our final layer, we do want to make sure it's nice and smooth. You can pinch both frames and the stencil and peel them all up together. If you're frosting another one, you just move over and keep frosting. We're gonna let this dry, and we'll add one more of that base stencil. All right, this is going to be the third and final time that we frost this base stencil. So the one that says base in the bottom corner. We're going to put down 2 frames. Since we frosted 2 layers, that helps lift your stencil. Add your stencil there. Make sure that the whole stencil is supported. And then sandwich it between that last frame to act as your thickness guide. Now, if you look at the provided color guides and the placement guides, we can see this is what we're creating as our base. And you can see that for my suggested color guide, I have it white. You can make it whatever color you want. But since for this tutorial I'm doing white, I don't have to worry about changing this color to something else. If you chose to do it a different color, this is where you would add that color, is on this third layer. The first 2 I always do white no matter what, because you're not going to see them. But on this third layer, that's where you would add whatever color you would like. All right, so now we're just going to trace that one more time. And then when you clean the stencil, you can set it aside, because now we get to move on and frost our actual design, which is always the best part. This is the layer that you want to look nice and clean. Don't want any scrapes in it if you can help it. If there are, I mean, it is frosting and people still love them even if they aren't perfect. There you go. That's your base. That'll make it nice and sturdy and easy to attach to your cookies later on. Let this dry fully and we'll move on to our design. I'm just laying these 3 frames down to just help move my anchoring point a little higher than the table. That way my stencil doesn't kind of curl downwards. It just helps support that stencil a little bit better. Okay, so what you're going to do is just make sure you have a nice kind of even border of white all the way around. And this stencil has all the details on it. So you can see on here, it has all the flowers, has the umbrella, the leaves, everything. But all we're getting from this layer, if you look at the A1, that's our green. The only thing that's going to show on the end is the leaves and stems. But everything has that frosting underneath it. And this is what's going to help create those really crisp designs so that you don't have any smudged icing. Because as we build up, the stencil is always laying flat and fully supported. All right, let's take a look at our design really quick. We have a ton of detail at the top, and then this big piece for the umbrella. And I think I'm going to tack down the bottom part of the umbrella first by starting just above where the top of the umbrella is there and just pulling downwards. I'm not applying a lot of pressure when I do this because I don't want to push any icing underneath that stencil. So you're just going to very gently swipe across. And we're going to do the same thing for this. You do want to be aware of the top of the umbrella here where it has this little curve in the handle. That's probably the only area that we might potentially have issues with. So I'm going to tack down the flowers on the sides, which might help hold this stencil down a little bit better, and we'll tack that down last. You aren't going to be pushing on this. Make sure you have enough icing. I've got quite a bit on there. Enough icing to barely put any pressure at all and swipe through the whole stretch of where you're trying to cover. And we're just letting that icing just stick. We aren't pushing at all. And by doing this, it allows us to tack down these pieces without pushing underneath. Right, so I have everything covered except for this little part of the umbrella, and I'm going to go this direction because it has that free floating piece of plastic there that I don't want to get icing underneath. Once everything is tacked down, I like to come through, and I'm not pushing very hard, it's just the weight of my spatula, and I'm scraping off some of that excess icing, so when we scrape it flat, we just have less icing building up on the side of our scraper. I hold this at about 45-degree angle, and then we're going to scrape across. And I like to do it a couple times until you start scraping down to that stencil. You want to be scraping icing off of the stencil. If you don't see that stencil, your layer is too thick. These layers are supposed to be super thin. Anchor in one corner and just peel from the opposite, and you can see we have the whole design right there. This is going to look so beautiful when it's done. I'm really excited about this one. That's the only time you're going to frost this A1 stencil, and so you can clean this, put it off to the side, and be done with it. We're going to let this dry before we add that next layer. I did forget to talk a little bit about this green color and how I achieved that green. So when you look at your placement guide, you can see that's what we just frosted there. On here, mine's a little bit more vibrant, like you can see there, but this is just kind of your general guide. These show you where this color falls in your color spectrum. So this one falls right between the yellow and that green color. And you can see that this is a lot more kind of dull, like there's more blacks to it. It's not as vibrant as, let's say, this one. This one's a lot more vibrant. That yellow is super noticeable. Each color, you got your red, yellow, green, blues, you know, all the way across, super vibrant. This one is not as vibrant. So you can tell already that this is a more pastel, cooler color. And so you're going to be using yellow and green to get this color, but you want to add a little bit of black to really calm and cool that color down. It's also near the bottom because you have your white on the bottom and your black on the top. So it's near the bottom, which means that you're not going to add a whole ton of food coloring. This is a very light color. The higher up, the darker the color. But this whole design, you can see all of the colors fall near the bottom. It's a very, very light colored design. And so we're going to be working mostly on the bottom range of these colors. Let's look at our placement guide real quick. We're going to be working on our A2 stencil, and that's going to be the yellow flowers that we have here and the handle. So you can see on the last one here, we have a yellow handle, yellow center, and a yellow flower. So that's what this is going to be. By the time we get to the end of this design, you can see that every single time we are building up this umbrella. So by the very end, that umbrella is going to be the furthest thing built outwards. So it'll look really cool because it'll look like these flowers are literally tucked inside of this umbrella. So we'll do this yellow one next. If you look at your color guide, you see, like I was saying, it's very vibrant. So I did add quite a bit of yellow and red to kind of get the orange, but then to kind of turn it this color, I had to add some black, because if you look, and you'll get used to, the more that you frost and create your colors, you'll get used to seeing this, but you can tell that this is kind of a brownish orange, and to get that brown, you add that black in there, because black, red, and yellow, depending on how much you put of each one, they're all will create kind of a brown color. So you can get your really dark browns, your really light browns. You can get this beautiful brownish yellow color. I don't even know the names of them, but you can get all sorts of shades by just using yellow, red, and black. Okay, I have my 3 frames down again. I'm going to line this up, and these are just going to snap into place with those flowers and the umbrella. So it's really easy to line these up. We don't need any references anywhere else because they'll snap right into place. Again, I'm going to start out by just tacking down this umbrella really quick, just because it's our largest piece, and that will kind of help hold our stencil in place. And then we can come in and do these flowers like we did before, where we just swipe the icing on there and then scrape the excess off afterwards. Scrape across. I like to go once and then twice to really get down in there. Scraping against that stencil, that's how you know that this is thin enough. And there are your beautiful flowers. All right, we're gonna let this dry and come back in about 5 minutes. The smaller the details, the quicker they dry. So this is gonna start drying really quick here. By the time you clean up and get your next color mixed, it'll be dry. Or if you are frosting multiples, by the time you get to that end one and back to the first one, it's gonna be dry. We're moving on to our A3 stencil. And this is going to end up being, one sec, line up real quick. This is going to end up being the inside of this flower and these petals. But again, we're still building everything up so that our stencils can lay flat and we can get those really nice, clean, crisp designs at the end. All right, make sure that everything is snapped into place. And this purple color, I only use the primary colors, so red, yellow, and blue, and pink and black to make all my colors. I don't have a huge selection of food coloring. So to get this color, I actually used hot pink and blue with a little bit of black. So you can create all of your colors just using basic set of food coloring if you would like. All right, let's tack down our umbrella. This is a little bit on the thick side, so I'm going to add a couple drops of water. Just because with your thinner details here with the flowers, if you have it too thick or too thin, it's very easy to push underneath those little tiny pieces of plastic. So you want to make sure that for those areas you have a nice consistency. Okay, let's fill this up and see what it looks like. Beautiful. All right, let's let that dry. I do have a toothpick that I keep on hand if I find that, like those petals, they kind of pushed underneath so they stuck together. If I just kind of swipe it. Since this is the last layer that you'll be seeing, I wanted to make sure that it looked the way I wanted it to. So just by swiping out that icing right there while it's still wet, I was able to separate those petals. All right, let's let that dry, and then we only have 2 stencils left to go. And we're going to be adding the pink for this tulip right here. The thing that I love about this design, here, let me move this real quick, is that you could literally stop here. You know, you could just call this good and you wouldn't have to continue changing the colors. Also, the colors are completely customizable. So depending on what type of what type of cookie set you are creating, you can match these colors to go along with any cookie set. So, all right. So that's going to be for our tulip, and then our last layer is going to be turning this umbrella blue. And for that pink, you're over here on the pink side. This side's kind of the red side, and this side's kind of the pink that starts turning into the purple. So I used quite a bit of pink and a little bit of red and some black to create this beautiful pink color. All right, I want to talk about this blue color that I made really quick. When you look at your color guide here, we're making this blue for the umbrella. That's your A5 stencil. If you look at it here, it just looks like kind of a light blue color. And you can see on here that it falls in this light blue area that's right between the green and the blue. So when I added blue to my icing, it was very blue, like not even close to this color. Even adding a little bit of black still wasn't quite this color. It was just too blue. So if you look here, you can see by it coming towards the left, towards the green side, because you've got your blue here and your green here, and it's kind of moved towards that green. It's like in the middle, right? And maybe even slightly towards the green. Because of that placement, I knew I needed to add some green to be able to achieve this blue color. Even though it's blue, it's kind of like a teal blue, it does need to have that green in there. So what I did is I took the green that I saved from this, because I save all of my colors just in case I need to reuse them. So I took some of this green, added it in here, and I got that blue color right away. So that's why I love looking at the colors this way, because I can see, okay, this is kind of near that green and I can't quite get that blue color. I need to add green. If it was leaning this direction, I would know I needed to add a little bit of hot pink to be able to get it to more of a purple color. And like this one here, we have our green. It's right in the middle of the yellow and the green, so it's not just green. There's some yellow in there. So that lets you know right away which colors you're reaching for, especially if you do it like I do, where you just have the primary colors, you've got your hot pink and you have your black. So it just makes it super quick and easy to be able to know exactly which colors you're mixing. All right, make sure that this is the right consistency since I was talking. It's a little bit thick. And this is going to finish off our design. So after this, we will be done. Again, it just snaps into place on your umbrella right there, since we built all the way up. And your stencil's laying nice and flat. Makes it really easy to be able to achieve those clean lines. Now on this one, I don't really want the pink to show through very much, so I'm gonna make it a little bit thicker, especially since it's the last layer. I don't worry as much about making sure it's super thin. It's more of the overall look on that last layer. So now you have a beautiful blue umbrella full of spring flowers. I'm gonna let this dry fully. I want to make sure that this topper dries all the way before peeling it off, so I'm going to give it at least 4 hours. If not, I might just like give it the rest of the day. And then we can peel it off and attach it to that cookie so that you can see it on the final cookie. But this is really, I love the dimensions of this, like the three-dimensional look that this design has. It's kind of hard to see from the top view, but I'll get some side views in there, and that umbrella just really pops with those flowers inside. Now that we've let this dry, we're just going to pick it up. You can see it's still attached to the plastic there. Flip it over your hand, and then you're just going to curl that plastic right off. You can see how thin these end up being. So you just add a little bit of a crunch to your cookie, but then there's that nice, fresh, soft icing underneath. I love, like I was saying, the three-dimensional effect of this cookie. It's kind of hard to catch it on camera, but you can see how those leaves just kind of are further back in the background, and then your flowers really pop, and your umbrella comes quite a ways out. So it looks like those flowers are actually sitting down inside of that umbrella. So it's a really beautiful, turned out to be a beautiful design. All right, we're going to attach this to our cookie. You want your icing to be a little bit runnier than what we stenciled with. And then you're going to come in and just kind of roughly trace the outline of your cookie. This doesn't need to be perfect because this topper is going to cover the whole top of the cookie. So if you aren't a professional piper, like I'm not, then you don't have anything to worry about. All right, and I'm just doing a squiggle of icing. If you want to experiment with doing more, feel free to. Take your topper, you want to line it up with your cookie, then just drop it into place. I'm going to take multiple fingers and apply a very gentle, even pressure. Just start wiggling that topper to help push that icing out around the edges. And the reason I like that icing to come out around the edges is because I know that that icing is supporting the full edge of this cookie. That way, when you hand these off to your customers later, they're more sturdy and there's less chance that there's any breakage, if there's any rough handling, or when they're packaged up in the box, things like that. Less likely to have any breakage. I like to use a toothpick to get down in these little areas that I can't really swipe away really easily. And this is just giving it a nice clean edge so that the topper seamlessly attaches to that cookie. And if you find that your cookie has some spread and it doesn't fit to your cookie as well, they still end up looking great. So don't stress too much about your cookie ending up being exactly perfect for your topper. All right. Okay. Now your topper is attached to your cookie, and that's it. That's how easy it is. You can see, oh, I kind of pushed on it, so it kind of bulged out that icing again, but I usually will keep these flat because what happened is I picked it up and the topper started sliding. I'll usually keep these flat and then I put them into a dehydrator for about 5 minutes, and that makes it so that that icing kind of the moisture evaporates out of it a little bit quicker and it sets a little bit quicker, and then you can kind of handle it a little bit more like that. But this one kind of wanted to slide on me, so I'm just going to clean up those edges again. All right, and there you have it. Beautiful umbrella, spring umbrella. Let this dry at least 4 hours. Again, I like to let them sit overnight just to make sure that all the moisture I can get out has gotten out, and when I bag it, that moisture is not going to affect the topper.